because I ain't drinking. Morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, February 11th, and this is the Senate Transportation and Military Affairs. Pierre, you want to call the roll?
Senator Anderson,
Here.
Senator Brennan,
Here.
Vice Chair Cooper,
Here.
Senator Kolb,
Present.
Chairman Pappas.
Excused.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Pierre. Well, welcome, everybody. I guess we just will bail in. First bill we're going to consider today is House Bill 33. Anybody want to talk about this? Darren, Director, you want to fill us in here?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Darren Westby, Director of Wyoming Department of Transportation. Thank you for the opportunity to get in front of you to talk about House Bill 33. Before I get started, I have Dennis here. He's our CFO for WYDOT. With me today, I got several WYDOT people in the staff that are here to speak on other bills today, which you got a full docket, so I appreciate that. But then also with us is the Aeronautics Commission. So we have Bruce McCormick as the chair and his team with, here we go, some of the Aeronautics Commission there in town for the meeting, a business meeting, and then also the Wyoming Airport Coalition is in town. So hopefully you all got down and had a reception there at the breakfast with the Airport Coalition. Mr. Chairman, I can talk about the bill. I can go into some of the why. I can go into a lot of the why. How would you like to, I can go into some explanation and then go through the bill. How would you like to proceed?
Director, I think maybe some explanation first and kind of give us some history and
Very good.
how this works.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In committee, I know Senator Kolb, Chairman Pappas, and Senator Brennan had listened to this through the interim. We had it as an interim topic. WYDOT funding was one. So we spent a couple meetings talking about some of the why, but just to refresh some of the memory, WYDOT is in charge of 7,000 miles of roads, around 2,000 bridges. We also have the Aeronautics Division, the Public Safety Communication, and the Wyoming Highway Patrol. All those have been somewhat added once back in '92, I believe, is when we went from a highway department to a Department of Transportation. And at that point, they started bolting on other things to the highway department, where we were just roads and bridges, to adding on and kind of expanding the scope of the agency. And so that was in '92. Progressing forward throughout the next 30 some years, revenues went all sorts of ways. And so what, at least for the last 20 years, we ebbed and flowed revenue-wise. We would see an increase in registration fees, and then we'd see a decrease in general fund. We'd see an increase in gas tax. We'd see a decrease in general fund, to the point where now we're basically off the general fund, minus the funds that you all put forward a couple years ago for WyoLink, and that put 8.6 million a biennium, about 4.3 million a year, from the general fund for the service of WyoLink, and helping serve all the counties and the communities that use the emergency communication. So basically for the last 20 years, the stateside funding has been flat. What we've seen, as everybody has seen in the world, inflation has gotten the better of us. Our buying power has decreased significantly. What we were fortunate to do in this last federal transportation funding bill, we were the recipient for the first couple of years of $100 million more of federal funds. this last year and the next year and a half, we're going to see a decrease at about 30 million. So we were sitting at about $70 million more in federal funds going forward. And so we're very fortunate to see that increase in federal funds, but the buying power has really taken a hit. We've been seeing 30 to 50% inflation over the last couple of years. So luckily, we've been able to receive the revenue increases from the federal government, but it's not keeping up with the inflation. Thank goodness we got it. With our stateside revenues being flat, our concern, the bigger picture of the concern is if the federal revenue stream starts to decrease, and we're not sure our next federal highway funding bill is coming up here in 26. So next year we'll be working with them now on the next funding bill in hopes that we can at least keep what we've been receiving and not go backwards. If we go backwards, our percentage of federal funds to state funds will get better, but it won't necessarily move the needle. And so right now we're sitting at about, depends on the day, about 65, 70% federal funds, 30 to 35% stateside funding. And so if those federal dollars go down, that percentage might look better, but we're actually going backwards. And so what we're trying to do throughout the interim was talking about the impact, trying to shore up that stateside funding. So if there is a decrease in federal funding, we'll not go backwards on our maintenance of our roads. If it does remain the same, we'll be able to just keep moving the needle forward. What I submitted at the beginning of session, I think we emailed you as well as gave you a packet that has just some information on what our agency does. There's a 2023 annual report. It goes kind of a deep dive into each program, talks about its successes, as well as some of the things that we're trying to work on. The Transportation Facts is just a really quick, handy book that anybody can just kind of open up and answer some of the questions you might have. And then a page by page of every kind of department and division that we have and what we do and why we do it and why it's so important. You know, we talk about our impact as an agency, and we talk about our impact of our transportation system as a whole. I think you guys are keenly aware, and it probably doesn't need to be said, but I'd like to continue to say it. Just infrastructure as a whole has become a passive impact. It's become a back of brain expectation, and expectations are great, and we like to be an expectation that, you know, we're going to have a road when you're ready to have a road. We're going to have an airport when you're ready to have an airport, or when you need an airport. But what happens when they're gone? You think about all of the industries that we have here in the state and the impact in which, if we're not successful with our mission, a lot of those industries will start to deplenish as well. You know, the extractive energies, tourism, and ag are the three big ones, and every one of those utilizes the transportation system to be successful. And so we're working really hard to, you know, you overuse the word spreading the peanut butter. We're trying to spread it out as thin as we can over those 7,000 miles to ensure that we can maintain a level of service that everybody is proud of. Everybody should utilize the system, but we're getting to the point with our buying power starting to shrink. The amount of miles that we can maintain maintain is starting to shrink to the point where the peanut butter is getting pretty thin. And so it's forcing us to think a little bit differently. We've been in, for the last probably 14, 15 years, what we call preservation only mode, where we're just really focusing our dollars on preserving the surface, trying to keep the water out, which is the water is the biggest issue, right? We worked really hard not to expand our system. If we can't maintain what we have, why would we add more lane miles? If we can't maintain what we have, why would we add more? And so trying to think through, when I started almost 2 years ago here next month, I asked the question, what was our exit strategy to get out of preservation only mode? And we really didn't have one other than we need more funding. Well, all right, well, that's a great, it's a great way to get out of preservation only mode, but if we receive more funding, can we expand more facilities? You start thinking about some of the projects that we have sitting on the shelf, some of the projects that our chief engineer and his team have been working on, getting prepared for if we receive more funding. You think about 287 South out of Laramie, making that a 4-lane, making that to the border. Highway 59 going from, Douglas up to Gillette, the mining industries and the oil and gas as well. 2026 from Casper to Shoshone and then up to the canyon there, get some passing lanes there. That's a long stretch that's getting a lot of capacity. Trying to pass it becomes a little bit difficult. You get a lot of cars backed up. Senator Anderson, you've probably seen that more times than most, but and Senator Cooper, you probably drove that a few times. And then down in the southwest, Highway 30 from the interstate to the border, we're seeing massive capacity growth there. And if we don't get out in front of this growth, we're going to see congestion and some more issues. But again, I go back to, if we can't maintain it, why would we grow our packet that we have to maintain? The big one that's kind of right here in southeast Wyoming is the I-80, I-25 interchange. with the growth coming up from Front Range, that interchange of I-80, I-25 is just, it's under-designed. It was designed, 50, 60 years ago when the cars were smaller, trucks were smaller. That little cloverleaf thing that they got going on is, I don't know, I try to avoid it because I don't like the blending, coming off an on-ramp and trying to blend with people that are going from 65 down to 30 to hit the off-ramp. And so anyway, we got a good design. We got a federal grant to move that project through design. And once it's in design, then out of design, we'll start working on federal discretionary grants to help us move that project forward as well. All of these projects that I talked about have the opportunity for federal involvement. Going back to the 70-30 split, most of our projects are 90% federal, 10% stateside, unless we get a grant. Some of them are 80-20s. This mega one at I-25, I-80, if we go that route, is a 50-50. So it's about a $500 million project. So that's a $250 million project, which would deplete our STIP, our State Transportation Improvement Plan, for many years. And so trying to figure out how we get forward is where we've been at for the last couple of years. And so gratefully working through the interim, LSO and the staff really did a lot of research, worked with our team to come up with a report throughout the interim of what our surrounding states are doing for revenue streams for their DOT. And we worked through them with the interim committee on different ideas and different thoughts. The ones that came out for funding was the severance tax redistribution of the statutory 1% that comes over after the 1.5 goes to the permanent mineral trust fund, the next 1% goes to that was constitutional. The next one is statutory, where the legislature has the ability to determine where that next 1% goes. Right now, half of it goes to the PMTF and half of it goes to the Common Schools land. Well, House Bill 29 was to divert that 1% to the highway fund. That failed in committee in the House. The second bill that came forward was this one, House Bill 33, which is a diversion of the sales tax on vehicles. And we see the nexus as being right. If you're going to buy a vehicle, you're probably going to drive it on a road. And so we're seeing the nexus be pretty spot on. It is a diversion that would go from the general fund to the highway fund. And the fiscal note right now, as it stood when we submitted it, was about $69 million a year of general fund diversion from the sales tax. And I lost my thought of train there, Mr. Chairman. But the importance of it is trying to ensure that we're stabilizing that revenue stream that's coming into the highway fund in hopes that we can really start to develop an opportunity to make some good sound decisions when we're calling for where we're going to spend these funds. The other thing that came through the legislative interim committee were, like I said, a whole list of ideas, and we worked through some of them, the ones that made sense. The hard part when we start comparing our state to other states, it's hard to compare apples to apples because some states have different tax structures that make it a little bit more palatable to do one thing or another. And so the comparison was difficult to sit there throughout the interim, knowing that there's different tax structures within their state versus ours. But it was a good exercise to go through to see what other states are doing for revenue. The other bill that came out of the interim was a House Bill 34, which is the efficiency study. And I know Senator Kolb helped us through that, trying to figure out how we get, how we can go through the analysis to ensure that we have a good report at the end that can help justify the extra funding. That through the House side of the House rotation of that bill, it passed out of committee, but when it went to appropriations, they killed the funding of it. Basically, the do pass fail out of the House appropriations, and so that bill never saw the floor on the House. And so, but what I did when the conversation with the House appropriations, they asked a lot about the efficiencies and what is YDOT, doing, what is it planned to do? And so a couple things that I handed out this morning, I asked the team after that meeting, can you just give me a memo of everything that we've been doing for the last 10 years on efficiencies? And it was a very voluminous amount of information. And so I asked my government services team to pare that down into a semi-readable, I still think it's like 4 pages long, 3.5 pages long, but just so you all are aware that the team continues to look at some efficiencies and innovations, and it's an ongoing effort. I know from our perspective, we're going to continue to look at ways to continue to innovate. I think being in 2019, and those of you that were on the committee heard this before, but we did a study in 2019, Dye Management came and did a financial audit basically of our operating needs and came up with an unfunded need that was pretty significant, and trying to find a way to decrease that delta. And that unfunded need was not just road maintenance, road construction, it was our vertical, our buildings, our equipment, aeronautics, highway patrol, public safety communication, all those were listed in the unfunded needs. And it came up in 2019 about $400 million a year. And so it's a big elephant. It's a big number to talk about in any room, regardless of people that deal in billions. It's still a big, big number. But the need is there, and we're going to work every day to try to justify those needs. But in the meantime, being $400 million a year short and still working our mission to the level that we're doing is a testament to the pride and passion that we have on our staffs that really try to work hard to ensure that the level of service that you all see and you guys can be proud of is to that level. Now, at some point in time, that degradation is going to happen, and what is that going to look like? And so the next thing that the House Chairman wanted me to do is to create a map, and that's the other map that you see that I handed out today. This is what I handed out to the House Committee. On there, you see the blue roads. Those are the National Highway System. Those are high priority roads. Those are the roads that were mandated by the federal funds that we received to ensure that we're doing appropriate level of service on those roads. The red roads are the non-National Highway System, and on here we call them low priority routes. But realistically, they have a priority, right? I mean, everybody in those districts or in that area have pride and passion in those, at least from the staff perspective. But I asked them to put the 2025, the projects that we have going on within the STIP this year, those are the dots that you see there. And so on those projects, you see how many are on the blues and how many are on the reds. And going forward, I think from a project prioritization, talking about efficiency of use of our funds, we truly need to work towards finding ways to ensure that some of these projects that we know need to happen, we want to happen. I look at it also from a workforce standpoint. It's been 15, 20 years since we've built a new road or added some significant capacity. So what does our experience level look like that is currently in our workforce now? How long are they going to be around to help mentor the younger engineers on how to design, how to build a road? That's a big concern for me. And so we're going to move forward with some of these projects. I'm going to find a way strategically, try to find a way to get some of these projects off the ground. That will come in an interim probably topic. Some of these projects that we know we want to go forward with, trying to find some extra funds, maybe one-time funds to help push some of these projects through. But we need to move forward with them on a multiple level of reasons to do so. And Mr. Chairman, I spoke for quite a while. I probably spoke more than I needed to, but do you have any questions? I'd pause here for a second to see if there's anything that you guys might want answered.
Questions, anyone? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, on that Cloverleaf, I-80 and I-25, I'm assuming, I got two questions. There must be a lot of bridges in that. And why is that a 50-50 split? Is that a negotiated deal with the feds, or do we have some way to make that a 80-20 or a 90-10 or something?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, it's a great question. The redesign is going to have a lot of bridges, possibly some flyovers to try to make it more flowing into the interchange to go one direction or the other. So yes, there'll be some bridges in there. From a federal standpoint, if we go after a mega grant, that's a type of grant, that's a big grant, they're at the 50-50. So that's if we go after a one-time $500 million project and get it, it would possibly be 50-50. Working with our new chief engineer, we're trying to work with planning and development to try to figure out if we could phase this, get at least each phase down a little bit more that fits within another grant category. We can probably get back to that 80-20 perspective. And so that's where we're working now to try to get our cost of entry into this thing a little bit lower. It might take a little longer to get the project done, but it would potentially save more stateside funding.
Follow-up. I want to congratulate you on that Teton Pass bypass that you guys accomplished. That was really incredible. What do we need? We're talking about building more road up there, or are we going to leave that temporary one as it is? And why not just leave the temporary one?
Sure.
Director, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator, thanks for the question and thanks for the accolades. I tell you, it's definitely a pride arrow in the quiver right now, because it was multiple testaments of Moon and Stars aligning with proper experience. We had 35 years experience on the ground up there as a resident engineer, 30+ experience with the relationships of not only the county, the city, but the Forest Service, everything up there, the Idaho Department of Transportation, to get that detour done in 20 days was pretty amazing. We had a contractor pretty much on site right in the area and was able to mobilize quickly. Work, like I said, with the Forest Service to do all that. So long story short, that was hood of truck design for that detour. And that's where the experience comes in. That's what I talked about a little bit earlier about what we might be starting to lose, and do we have the mentorship coming up? Some of the newer residents out there may not have had that experience to be able to do what he did to make that happen in such a short amount of time. So that's why I want to try to get some more road building done while we still have that experience, and try to teach some of our mentor some of our younger engineers coming up. But anyway, on that, so that detour, basically, it was a big long S curve of a fill to try to keep it 10% grade. So it's a 10% grade from the bottom of the hill to the top of the pass, and then 10% from the top of the pass down into Wilson there. And so to keep that 10%, they had to go out that extra 700 feet. Well, that's what collapsed. And so what they did was just detour where they could. And it's about a 700-foot detour instead of going back out around another, I think it was like 1,800 feet to keep that 10%. So the detour is sitting at a little over 11%. It's pretty steep. It's like 11.5%. So it's pretty steep. In the summertime, it's not too bad. I mean, trucks have a hard time getting up it, and they better be slow before they hit that curve. So from a longevity standpoint, in the wintertime, we got a snow plow up there working round the clock on that, because it's too steep to, if any vehicles get on there and there's any slickness on it at all, it's really steep. And so from a longevity standpoint, we don't want to keep 11% road. We're working on the reconstruction right now. We got, the plan was to get up to about 85% this winter, and then finish it in the spring. Winter set in a little bit early up there in the mountains, and they only got about 65% complete on the rebuild. And what they're doing there is innovative design. They're bringing in some lighter weight fill material and building it up in lifts, putting earth and then lightweight fill, just to try to decrease that weight pressure on that fill slide or fill section, so there's not so much pressure going into the future. So hopefully we don't have this happen again. And so it's a long project. It is a great project. Never let a good crisis go to waste. There's about another prideful conversation. There's about 250 to 275 people that worked on that slide just within our agency, from accountants to programmers to designers to, you name it, media, public relations. I mean, there's just a lot of people that came together. And from a team building aspect, I couldn't have picked a better team building project that just happened to fall in our lap. And it's, again, prideful to know that we have the talent in our agency to make that happen. And the way that they came together was pretty astronomical. And we should all be proud as a state. This is a national, global media event up there, and we showed what Wyoming could do. So thank you for that question.
Good job.
Thank
One
you.
more question. We've lost 9 snowplows this winter. I was reading in the paper. Are we insured on those? Are they complete loss, or can we repair some of them, or?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yeah, it still mind-blowing to me to see why we get these things hit. I know Senator Kolb and I have had conversations about the brightness of the lights and whether they're too bright or not bright enough. And yes, we've had 9 strikes. Some of them are plow strikes, somebody driving too close and they hit the plow. Luckily, not a significant amount of damage. We can take them back. Our riggers can get in there and get those repaired. We've had a few head-ons collisions. You're not going to win on a head-on. Luckily, nobody perished in those. But again, the riggers will go in and take the full demolished plow off and try to bend some, weld some, and then put a new plow on. The ones that get hit from behind with the semis, those are pretty catastrophic, and they'll take a little bit more work to get those back into shape. But every time a plow's hit, not only do we have the equipment piece go down, but then possibly if we have any injuries in the snowplow drivers, then they're down. So then we have, fortunately, unfortunately, nobody's been seriously injured on our side of the house, but we do have some backup plows while those are getting fixed, so we can keep this level of service where we need to. But if we get too many more hit and it takes too long to get them repaired, it is going to cause some issues. And so luckily, again, we have great mechanics, great welders, riggers that can make this turn around quick and get them back on the road. So it is kind of scary to think how many are getting hit. And we've had a pretty mild winter. And to have 9 hits so far is pretty crazy.
Thank you. Any more questions? Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Director Westby, well, I like to say about the people that run into our snow plows, when it's snow white out, you can't fix stupid. I mean, if you're that incompetent of a driver and you don't realize you're running in behind something kicking up the snow, feel sorry for the snow plow drivers and all the injuries that are happening because of this. It's just really ridiculous that people don't take more care when they approach a situation like that. But my question is going to be around the what are we doing with highway funds when it comes to interchange construction as opposed to just straight out road construction or reconstruction, whatever it may be. What drives you to pick like an interchange, which is really a horrendous amount of money that seems to be working, currently? Obviously it's not up to current standards, but why don't you choose to fix just miles of highway instead of intersections? I guess what's the calculation that goes into that? And then I'll just ask you the second question about what to do with this money. I mean, obviously, the study you had says you need a lot more money than currently is even going to ever be available. It's just never going to happen at that levels. But why wouldn't we want to restrict this money to specifically horizontal construction for highways? Say we have this money come in and say it becomes law. What are your thoughts on just using it for highway construction instead of specifically just carving it out and say, hey, we're just going to fix our roads? I mean, that's what I've heard for I don't know how many years, that the major problem is we just don't keep up with the roads. And I'm not much of a fan of the peanut butter explanation, but I think it does hold true. Is we're trying to do something that we really don't have the funds for to do it right. So what's your thoughts on those two things? Specifically, why we do what we do and a choice of like what we're building, and then also the funding. Specifically, why wouldn't we just have it to be construction funds? I mean, are you adversarial to that? What are your thoughts? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director? Any thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, thanks for those questions. Project prioritization is pretty significant conversation within the agency. We do the statewide transportation improvement plan, which is a public process. We go, our 5 districts work within their district with their county commissions, with their local communities to try to find what are the things that they are needing within their highway funds or highways in there. And then those lists of projects come back to the district then prioritizes, then the 5 districts prioritize amongst themselves, and then it comes to exec team and then to the commission. And so from a prioritization standpoint, I think as history goes, they have been trying to make sure that all 5 districts get a similar amount of money, which I'm trying to develop a different strategy for that prioritization, or at least distribution of those funds by district on construction and maintenance in those areas. And so hopefully going into the future, project prioritization or funding prioritization is going to be a significant conversation going forward. Like I said, going into this map here, looking at some of those areas that that we're federally required to do because we accept, 70% of our funds are federally funded or are federal. We need to ensure that we're doing, we're placing those funds in those areas, and then work towards what is left and make sure that we can do the best we can do. As for interchanges versus roads, it really comes down to capacity and the use. You look at ADT, you look at how many crashes, you look at a lot of the things that, did I do something? No. Okay. There's a lot of things that go into why a project is on the list. And I could invite the chief engineer up if you want a deeper dive into some of those project selections, what goes into them. But it's a significant amount of conversation and data that help drive some of those decisions of what goes in the STIP and when. As for your question on whether or not we should restrict this to just go to roads, our needs on roads is significant. It's a lion's share of what our unfunded need was. But the other thing that happened 15, 20 years ago is when we started prioritizing the roads and trying to spread that money throughout the system. What we also did was we really starved our facilities. Our facilities are in not great shape. Rock Springs has a nice facility, but there aren't too many of those out there. If you get out to some of our other shops, they're significantly aged out to the point where they can't even store the equipment that we have today. And so when you start thinking about our mission, if we have a snowplow that won't start because it's been sitting out all night, we can't get on the road to plow it. That's a concern. And some of our facilities, our equipment's outgrown our facilities to where we can't keep them inside, and that just deteriorates them quicker. So equipment, I said it there a little bit earlier, our equipment has also was not a significant priority, so some of the equipment fell over the course of years. We've been working hard to get them back. It got to a point where some of that equipment was so old and so degraded that we weren't being able to perform the mission. So we've been working on getting systematically some of that equipment replaced over the last 3 or 4 years, which is good, but our facilities are in bad shape. And so to put this all towards roads, I wouldn't say I would fight you on it on that regard, because the roads need it, but we also have significant other needs within the agency. So I guess being prescriptive of where these funds could go could hamstring a bigger problem, but it's a policy decision that you all can make. We would just have to prioritize a little bit differently.
Any further questions for the director?
Follow-up question.
Senator Kolb, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, Director Westby, I'm not a fan of this, but I will tell you, in my opinion, it's better that, this is going back and forth now between you and I, that we prioritize this, and I say that for other purposes. I think if we're going to go down this road, I mean, you can shift money, okay? And if we're talking about building the projects in Teton County, well, that's another story. But I think it keeps it cleaner, and that was what I was wanting your opinion on. I think it keeps it cleaner. That we would direct it towards that, because that's what we hear. People spend them. Okay, wouldn't you agree that most people in the state of Wyoming spend 99% of their time driving down a highway, and maybe less than 1% of the time driving on an interchange? So the people that I represent in the state of Wyoming and people that drive through the state are spending all their time on that road, on the flat road, driving somewhere. And that's why I thought maybe it was a question about prioritization. As that being in balance, what are your thoughts about people, what their experiences are and what they spend time on driving? And I want to follow up with the STIP question. That was never asked. Never asked was that during a STIP. would you prefer to do road maintenance over interchanges? That was never asked. I've been at STIP meetings, and that does not come up. So I do look forward to the STIP meetings, including that question. What would you like to have? I mean, would you like to put road maintenance money out there, or say interchange update money, or what, you know, that, but that being asked, because I hadn't heard it, unless you can say maybe at the Rock Springs meeting, it just wasn't done. I don't, you know, maybe it was an oversight, I don't know. But just your opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, obviously I wasn't there in the STIP meetings in Sweetwater County. I know in the meetings here that we're having on I-80, I-25, the county as well as the city has been involved in all the planning meetings going forward. What is asked and what is requested, I'll definitely dig into to ensure that those are being asked. As for the amount of time spent on a road versus an interchange, I'm not 100% sure that's a fair question, because you can't get on a highway or an interstate without having an intersection, without going a long ways. And so, I don't know, tomato, you know, what's in the cart in front of the horse conversation. We can have a deeper conversation. I can definitely go ask my crew if they have a better answer than I do on it. But I know from the interchange, and I can only speak to this one because I've been involved with this one here at I-80, I-25, the turning circles on the Cloverleaf are too tight. We have trucks getting overturned on a regular basis, trucks driving too fast around it and they tip over. The blending, like I talked about before, where you're trying to make a hairpin turn and get your speed up to 65 so you can blend with somebody that's also stopped trying to get in, it just isn't working. Back in the day, that was the Cloverleaf was the design 50 years ago. Today it's not. And so trying to improve that, improve safety, decreases crashes, decreases the risk of injury. And then from an operational standpoint, when a truck overturns, that shuts that interchange down, and then we can't get people on and off the interstate. And obviously I-25, I-80 is a very commerce-heavy intersection, so having that down impacts significantly. So I would argue interchanges are very important. The one that you're talking about in Rock Springs, I'd have to dig into a little bit more, but I appreciate the conversation. And you know, the one thing I can say throughout this whole time, Mr. Chairman and committee, I appreciate the questions that are coming. It makes me think. I'm still new at this game. I'm still learning. I'm still asking my crews the hard questions that you guys ask me, and it makes us better. So I appreciate the conversation and our questions.
Thank you, Director. Senator Brennan, do you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to I think where Senator Kolb's question is going. My question isn't so much as that the question should be whether like we spend more time on flat or we spend more time on an interchange, but where is the safety in there? Because where are the accidents happening? So an interchange, if it's not designed correctly, then you're going to end up with more accidents on that interchange. There also might be some roads where maybe you've got some blind spots or something, and you're going to end up with, or the way that the turn is, you might end up with more likelihood to roll. And so those are the spots. I mean, I would want to know when, and I think that this is what the department is getting at, saying that they're looking at is the safety of those where they happen. I would guess, I mean, I'm just trying to recall on patients that I've taken care of in the ICU in accidents and stuff, and where do those happen? They don't happen on a straight piece of interstate. They happen where there's turns or interchanges or spots like that most of the time. And I think that's where our question is when we look at those types of things on, and I think that's what some of these prioritizations do. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the question to ask, not where do we spend most of our time driving, but where are the accidents most likely to happen?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, thank you. The road safety, we have a whole group that works on gathering data of where accidents happen. Do we see a heat map starting to grow a little bit in a certain area, and then we can start to prioritize what is, investigate what is the issue there? Is it road surface is too slick? We need to go out and put a new surface down, get some friction on that road. Is that a cause? Is there a blind corner, so to speak? Is it too sharp of a corner? Is the interchange too tight, like the one that we just talked about? All those things get put into the calculus when we start determining which projects are getting prioritized, definitely. And like the ones I talked about, 287, 59, 2026, Highway 30, all of those are in the mix. It just, the one, just 287 from Laramie to the border is $62 million. That's the estimate. So it's not a small chunk of change to make that happen. Do we see it as a priority for us? Yes, it's not an unsafe road, but could it be safer? By creating what we need to do. It just takes money. It takes a lot of money. And so prioritization, we're trying to balance, road construction, road maintenance versus operations. What can we maintain on a day-to-day basis with the operational dollars, which is state funds. The construction and the maintenance, meaning putting a new surface, reconstruct, adding new lane miles, that's all federal dollar eligible. The snowplow drivers, the fencing, the cleanup, the pothole patch repair, that's all stateside dollars. We can't use federal dollars for that. So that it's a big juggling act of where the stateside funds can go to facilities, equipment, our aeronautics. So it's a balance that we all have to go through. But thank you for the comments and questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Anderson.
So with this bill, we're asking to make that permanent, that 4% on vehicles and trailers and that kind of things, and making it permanent. You've got it listed out for 3 years. Was that some of the resistance on the other bill that you had? Was that we would make it a permanent? I see there isn't any deadline on this.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that was the intent, was starting this year, going forward, to be a permanent diversion of those sales tax on vehicles.
Thank you, Director. Director, you want to walk us through the bill real quick?
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So page 1, bill summary, we've already talked, diversion of the motor tax on sales and use tax on motor vehicles and trailers to the highway fund. In there, and we do have a representative from the Department of Revenue here that can speak a little bit more coherently as to the actual tax itself. But page 2 talks about the distribution. 3915 is the sales, and 3916 is the use. So it's the sales and use tax. Going into, and the one thing I want to make really clear, and we worked through this in the interim, is that this is just the stateside sales and use tax, not the county portion or the local government portion. So this is just, at the beginning of the session, it was 70%. I think there was a bill that went through that cut that down to 65%. But so just the stateside sales tax distribution. And so page 3 talks about remitting those, the treasurer shall distribute the revenue collected to YDOT. Then section 2 talks about this is, talks about the date in which it shall apply on July 1 of this year. Section 3 talks about talks, this is something that, working over the interim, this is gonna take some programming on this, on the Department of Revenue side, because it's a change, and so they're gonna have to program, and it could take some time to do that programming, reprogramming. And so what they came up with was, starting this year in July 25, going for 1 year, they would just take a like amount of what would have been collected in this and just transfer it from the general fund, but then going forward, it'd be an automatic disbursement to the highway fund through that. And then, again, the effective date on July 2025. And that's a quick overview of the walkthrough, but like I said, if there's any questions on the actual tax handshake or programming, we do have Mr. Fanning here, I believe.
Any other questions for the director? Would, Dennis, would you like to say a few words?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Dennis Byrne, Chief Financial Officer with WYDOT. I would like to maybe just touch on one thing, a question that Senator Kolb asked. And just to be clear, whatever the legislature decides that we should do with this funding, that's exactly what we will do with this funding. We will take that direction and we will use that funding in the way that we're directed to. One thing to consider in this conversation is that WYDOT is responsible for more than just horizontal infrastructure. We are also responsible for our vertical infrastructure, and we're responsible for aeronautics, patrol, equipment, as the director has already suggested. And I tend to agree with Senator Kolb in that we show a need for $400 million, and the likelihood of us getting that is remote. We all understand that. So for that very reason, Mr. Chairman, I think that limiting this money to only horizontal construction puts us in a bit of a corner, because we are, again, still responsible for that vertical construction, that equipment, the aeronautics, and all those other things. Now, the biggest need is certainly on horizontal construction, and that's where we would put the majority of any funding, additional funding we would receive. But I would just ask the committee to consider our other needs in this conversation and maybe not limit us too dramatically on where that money goes. But again, where you direct us to use it, we'll use it.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Anderson, go ahead.
It strikes me that there's quite a bit of money in that, and just for the sales tax on motor vehicles and trailers, what's included in motor vehicles and trailers? Is that all Class 8 trucks, Class 6 trucks, passenger and truck, and it just seems like you'd have to cover darn near everything to bring in 69 million.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the answer to that question is yes, but I think we'll ask Brett if he knows better.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Senator Kolb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a general question. I get baffled on why you'd have an issue about restricting it for horizontal construction. Aren't you able just to shift money? I mean, can't you take, say you're currently funding horizontal construction at X amount of dollars, and you take this, then you redivert money into some other area, or maybe could you help me out to understand why you couldn't do that? What stops you from moving money around in your agency to cover that scenario? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to a certain degree, yes, we can do that, but we can't use federal dollars to do that. So we have a very limited amount of money that we would be able to use for vertical construction, equipment, aeronautics, et cetera. So the answer to your question is yes, we can do that, but it's not unlimited. It is very limited, and the needs in those areas outweigh the ability for us to move those dollars.
Further questions for the director or Mr. Byrne? Do you have some other folks who'd like to address us from the department?
Mr. Chairman, I think the department is covered. If you have questions that Senator Anderson had from the Department of Revenue, that would probably be an opportunity.
Is anybody from the Department of Revenue here? I believe there is. Good morning. Would you introduce yourself for the public and tell us what you know?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Brett Fanning, the Excise Tax Administrator at the Wyoming Department of Revenue. And I'd be happy to answer some of the questions that have come up over the little bit in our discussion here, and truly appreciate that we were involved in a lot of the interim discussions, and YDOT involved us in some of these discussions. So the first question, Mr. Chairman, what's all incorporated in motor vehicles? Basically, anything that gets a title and is going over the road is going to be included in this. It's important to note, though, there are some sales and use tax exemptions related to big motor vehicles that are going across state lines. So we do have exemptions for trucks, big trucks that are used in interstate commerce. But the vast majority of this tax that came with our fiscal note is tax that's when you go to the county treasurer and you purchase a new motor vehicle, that is trucks, cars, RVs, all of those items that get titled at a county treasurer where sales taxes due. Again, outside of those exempted big motor vehicles that we have. So, Mr. Chairman, Senator, did that answer your question? Related to where the sales tax is coming from. It's also important to note too, Mr. Chairman, Senator, that when I checked this morning, our county treasurers are a top 3 sales tax collector in every single county, all 23 counties. Our sales tax on motor vehicles, while there are some exemptions, the vast majority of those are sales taxable. And so this fiscal note right here, as the director mentioned, is when we go to the county treasurer, here, say in Laramie County, I'm going to be charged 6% sales tax. Okay, so I buy a new car or truck, 6% sales tax. It's really broken down into a couple pieces. The first piece is the statewide 4% that's mandatory across all 23 of our counties. Then each county has the discretion to have voter-approved pennies. Here in Laramie County, there's 2 pennies. This bill seeks to pull out the statewide 4%. But then it also goes a little further because that statewide 4% is broken down into 2 pieces. Some goes to the state general fund, some goes to our local partners. So this one takes the 69%, a little over 69%, and puts it into a separate bucket. Then the Department of Revenue will distribute that bucket to YDOT and the State Highway Fund, and then the remaining local share of the statewide 4%, distribution does get a little complicated, and then the remaining pennies back to the local shares. So this will not impact our local share distributions, nor will it impact our county treasurers. This is all internal at the Department of Revenue. The county treasurers, they actually submit to us a completely separate return than our normal vendors. So they fill out their own return. That's how we were able to almost exactly get you what the fiscal note would have been if this legislation were in effect last year.
Thank you, Mr. Fanning. More questions for Mr. Fanning? Senator Anderson.
Please, Mr. Chairman. So if we're saying we're going to take the whole 4% sales tax collected on those vehicles and send it to the highway department, I understood you to say there was 2 cents and then 2 cents went someplace else. I thought this said that the whole 4% goes to the highway department.
Mr. Fanning?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, yeah, outstanding awareness on that. So of the statewide 4%, there is a portion that goes to the state general fund, and then there is also a portion that goes to our local partners. So in that statewide 4%, there's actually 2 pieces. This bill, as it's written, is just the state's portion of the 4%, just the state's portion. So as the director mentioned, there would be no impact to our local partners with this bill. It's just the statewide portion of the 4%.
Thank you, Mr. Fanning. Mr. Fanning, who would your local partners be?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you, outstanding. It's local governments, counties, cities, towns. Those are our local partners.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Fanning? Any other department? Thank you, Mr. Fanning. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, I have one other thing, if I may, please.
Go ahead.
As was mentioned, this is there is an IT programming cost to do this. And it does get kind of complicated when we're talking about separating something into another bucket, distributing that bucket completely differently than what we do with our current distribution statutes. And so if the Department of Revenue respectfully requests to add an IT programming fiscal note to this. And it's a one-time programming cost. And as was mentioned during the interim, that section 3 of this bill on page 3, that is directly related to our IT programming. The first year, we're going to do this the best we can, and we will get those funds exactly over to YDOT. Then going forward, IT programming, so this becomes a normal distribution. Without IT programming, this is going to be done on an Excel spreadsheet outside of our normal distribution and a normal system. Having something of this magnitude outside our normal distribution channels and our normal system is just something that doesn't sit well with auditors. It doesn't sit well for transparency. And so that's why the Department of Revenue would respectfully, sorry, Mr. Chairman, ask for a one-time IT programming cost of $107,000. $107,801. So just under $108,000 for a one-time programming cost. Then going forward, once it's programmed into our system, then it's covered under our standard maintenance contact that's already funded by our great legislature. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Anderson. Dr.
did I understand you to say there's an exemption for Class 8 trucks that travel all the highways, not just domestic? Is that an exemption that we made?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, the answer is yes. Here's the exemption, and it's really related to a federal exemption as well. So any sales of railroad rolling stock, including locomotives purchased by interstate railroads, aircraft purchased by interstate air carriers, which are holders of valid United States Civil Aeronautics Board permits, and trucks, tractor trailers, semi-trailers, and passenger buses in excess of 10,000 pounds gross vehicle weight, which are purchased by common or contract interstate carriers, which are operating in interstate commerce under exemption clauses in federal law as they're used in interstate commerce. So again, big vehicles used crossing state lines, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, so are they exempted entirely? All the whole 4% or just part of it?
Mr. Fanning? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, they're exempt for all of it. Outstanding question.
Wow.
Senator
Thank
Cole?
you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just to ask another question. So I could just drive my truck across state lines and call interstate commerce and then get exempted? I mean, what, is there any criteria to this? Or is it just making a statement that it's used for interstate commerce for the exemption? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fanning?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, outstanding discussion, and it's one I'm going to leave for another time. The answer is yes, there is some gray area in that, in what qualifies as interstate commerce, and it's something that the Department of Revenue, who administers sales tax, the Department of Transportation, who administers licensing those entities, and our county treasurers wrestle with every single day.
Thank you, Mr. Fanning.
Yeah, I believe
Any other
that.
questions for Mr. Fanning?
No.
It doesn't look, anybody else in, any other departments that want to speak on this issue? Anybody else in the room want to come up? Pretty good looking crew. Gentlemen, if you'd introduce yourselves and have at it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jonathan Russell, Wyoming County Commissioners Association, and sitting next to me is Commissioner Short from Converse County. Just quickly, I want to say that we heard the director talk about relationships with counties. And he is correct. We have a great working relationship with WIDOT, our county commissioners and those with them. And because of that, we want to see them to be successful, because we know that we'll benefit from that as well. And that's why we support this bill. We appreciate the work that WIDOT does in our communities, and we want to see that continue.
Mr. Chairman, Robert Short, Commerce County Commissioner and Vice President of Wyoming County Commissioners Association. And just a little color, whilst we were listening to the director testify, I did a quick calculus on the number of dollars that I've contributed to my local county and property tax, and then did an extrapolation of how many miles of road that would take care of at my current property tax level based on 12 mills that is levied in the county. If all 12 mills were applied to road construction specifically, which we know they are not, but I'm using a hypothetical, 20 years of taxes would cover approximately 1,440 square feet of road. So in order for WIDOT to be funded appropriately, we think that this bill helps to cover some of the needs across our state. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Senator Kolb, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Short, I think you have to double your figures. We have a 50% property tax reduction coming up. Thank you, Mr. Short.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, point taken.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there anybody else in the room want to visit on this? Ms. Little, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kelly Little, and I'm representing the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming, and we are standing in support of this bill. The revenue stream contemplated in this bill is a direct nexus to the use of the revenue. I think when most of us go to pay the sales tax on a new or new-to-you vehicle, we would expect, and it would be logical for that revenue to go to improvement and repair of the roads. Wyoming motorists travel 9.32 billion miles per year on Wyoming's road system, and traffic accidents in Wyoming imposed a total of $889 million in economic costs in 2023. Investing in our transportation system is an imperative matter of public safety. There are many threats to the state's ability to keep pace with growing transportation infrastructure needs. Those include construction cost inflation, the erosion of motor fuel taxes due to inflation, improved fuel efficiency, and adoption of hybrid and electric vehicles. The Federal Highway Administration's National Highway Construction Cost Index, which measures the rate of inflation in labor and material costs, increased 36% between 22 and 23, and has increased 59% since the start of 2021. The longer we wait to shore up the condition of our road system, the more expensive the work will be. We support rational and logical changes to Wyoming's revenue distribution streams that would allow for enhanced investment in the road system. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Little. Any questions for Ms. Little? Bob?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm Bob McLaurin with WHAM. Jonathan stole most of my thunder. We too have a great relationship with the department, and many of our main streets are state highways. So we like this bill a lot. Hope you'll pass it on. Be happy to answer any questions, sir.
Questions for Mr. McLaurin? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the room who would like to testify on House Bill 33? Pierre, do we have anybody online? Nobody online? Nobody else in the room? We'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move bill.
Moved by Senator Anderson, second by Senator Brennan down there. Any discussion? Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I'll be a no vote on this, and I'm going to explain why. This represents a major fiscal shift for the state of Wyoming. At a point in time where we're cutting state revenues or increasing state expenditures at the cost of what we have traditionally been doing, combined with the fact that there is no sideboards to this that's restricted to highway construction. We talk about, vertical construction. Vertical construction has absolutely no oversight by the state of Wyoming legislative body. The Transportation Commission has oversight over this. And I think if we're going to have a partnership, we need a partnership, and this isn't it. That's why I'm against it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Senator Kolb. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be a aye on this bill. What better way to spend our general funds than supporting the DOT with all that they do with the aeronautical and the highways? They have a lot to do, and it's something that the citizens of Wyoming notice when we have enough funding and when we don't. So I'll be an aye. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any amendments?
Question.
Seeing no amendments, question's been called. Jared, would you do a roll call for us?
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Brennan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cooper,
Aye,
Senator Kolb,
No.
Chairman Pappas.
excused.
So do pass.
Well, House Bill 33 has passed Transportation Committee. The next bill for our consideration,
Who's doing it on the phone?
oh, I'm sorry. Senator Anderson, you want to do that one, or do you want somebody else to do it?
Whatever. Or we could have Colby do it.
I'll do a great job if you so desire.
Let's run with Anderson. What do you think?
Sure.
The committee decides. Oh, no, okay, I was ready.
Ah,
Thank you.
okay.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you all for your testimony. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 23. House Bill 23. Anybody in the room or bring some attention to this? Good morning. Would you introduce yourself and kind of fill us in on what's going on with House Bill 23?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Misty Zimmerman. I am the program manager for Wyoming Driver Services. This bill was brought forward during the interim committee as part of our modernization effort. As you may be aware, the department is currently modernizing our 1986 mainframe system to be of a current status. As we looked through all of our statutes, we identified multiple instances where we needed to bring some of them up to the current date, and this was one of those. So, Mr. Chairman, would you like me to walk through the bill or give you a little bit more?
Why don't we just walk through it real quick?
All right, the
We don't
intent
dwell
of.
on too much.
Great. The intent of this bill, although it's very lengthy, has one intent. Currently, right now, there are multiple sections of statute that require a law enforcement officer to take the physical card from a driver if they are cited for certain violations, driving under the influence, driving under suspension. Back in the day when this statute was built, that card did in fact mean that you could drive. Today, that privilege lies in the technology. So the card is only as good as it is the day that it's printed and the day that it's sent out. So we walked through this. On page 1, there is obviously the explanation of the bill. Page 2, there are multiple references to the temporary license, and this is for our implied consent law, which is one of the instances where the officer is required to take the physical credential from the individual. So all of this, the changes on page 2, moving into page 3, and the top of page 4 are really about removing that requirement, the issuance of the temporary license that's associated with the administrative action or the administrative implied consent law. And then providing additional information about the notice that's given to the individual at that time. As we continue to walk through, on page 3, there's some clarifying language that was added on line 14, where it talks about 45 days after the receipt of the request from the department. And that was to clarify some information about when the Office of Administrative Hearings is required to set the hearing for this action. Going on to page 4, 316104, remove the requirement for on lines, 9 through 13, remove the requirement for the surrender of the driver's license. On page 4, starting on line 15, we have the same corresponding language with the implied consent for a youthful offender. And as we walk through this, we also realized that the notice that was outlined in 316-108 didn't bear the same information as the notice that was included in 102, so we've added that. That's on page 6. Page 7, 317-113, under fees, it just removed the requirement. There are several statutes that are repealed because of this change, and I'll go through those at the end. So a lot of the changes that you see on page 7 and then again on page 8, lines 4 and 5 are removing those repealed statutes. And then beginning on page 8, lines 21 and then through page 9, lines 1 through 9, this was the requirement of returning the license. We did make one amendment on the House side, which is on, the amendment was from Chairman Brown on page 8, line 21, which was actually remove the word of license, and because we removed all reference to license in the bill, we also needed to remove it from the actual, title of the statute. And then continuing to go forward, sections 2 are the repealed sections, and I'll go through those with you at the very end. And then this does have an effective date of July 1, 2025.
Thank you, Ms. Zimmerman. In your own words, real quickly, would you just kind of summarize what you think this does? Go ahead first.
Senator Cooper, what this does is this removes that requirement for law enforcement to physically take the credential from the driver for certain violations. It also removes that requirement for them to return that credential to the department. It removes the requirement for the department to hang on to it and return it to the individual. We all know that you cannot almost do anything any longer you can't get a prescription without that physical form of identification. So it allows that person to keep the card as a form of identification during that time, and then when the privilege is restored, they can drive on the roads again.
Thank you, Ms. Zimmerman. Senator Kolb, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Question, page 9, line 5, and when you chose the word his, return his, and I was wondering, because they did change the after that license and struck and, but is that a correct, or would you want to have the in there? I guess, what were your thoughts on that, or is his some sort of terminology that we would want to continue to use? Just your opinion about that particular word. Thank you.
Ms. Zimmerman, go ahead.
Chairman Cooper, Senator Kolb, that's existing language in the bill. It would be up to the determination of the committee if they wanted to make that adjustment.
Any other questions for Ms. Zimmerman? Seeing none, anybody else? Thank you, Ms. Zimmerman, I appreciate your testimony. Anybody else want to visit about House Bill 23? Anybody in the room? Mr. Thompson. Would you introduce yourself and have at it, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Alan Thompson, the Executive Director of WASCOT, the Chiefs and Sheriffs Association. We have some pretty broad support amongst our members for this for a couple of reasons. It takes one of the steps out of the DUI process and the other processes that require right now for officers to seize a license and then send it off. There's some procedural issues that come to bear sometimes when you lose the license, or it gets lost in the mail, or all these other things. And then there's also this argument that could be made that this is actually good for officer safety, because when we're dealing with people that don't have identification on them, we can miss, they can tell us there's somebody else or whatever, but if we find valid identification on them, even if the license itself is not valid for driving purposes, it helps us further identify them for the cases that we're working in, and we can check through the computer system to check the validity of their driving privileges. So we don't see any downside to this at all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any questions for Mr. Thompson? Senator Anderson.
Help me understand this. So they get to keep the card for ID, but once they're convicted of DUI, is their license pulled, or they still get to keep their card?
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding they get to keep this card, but it doesn't mean they have driving privileges. It's my understanding that any rules that are promulgated from this will provide them with maybe a paper copy for limited driving privileges or whatever the computer system might say. When we run the license, dispatch will tell us they have limited driving privileges to and from work from this date to this date. And we find them 72 miles away from their place of work and home. It's probably a violation of law. So we don't see any, I guess from a law enforcement perspective, I don't know that it matters that they have the card or don't have the card. The computer system will give us the information that we need.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any other questions for Mr. Thompson? Hearing none, is there anybody else in the room that'd like to opine on this good bill? Seeing none, Pierre, anybody online? Nobody online. We'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on House Bill 23? Moved by Senator Kolb, second by Senator Anderson. Discussion? Senator Kolb.
Yeah, for the committee discussion on that page 9, line 5 on it doesn't read right, it seems like, because his was, I'm not getting woke about this word his, but it seems to read better if it's division shall immediately return the registration to the division. His, it was associated with a license before, so it kind of made more sense. So I just wanted to bring that up to committee discussion, and if anyone thought, I'd make an amendment.
Second his amendment.
That was the amendment I wish to have made before it was seconded.
So
To
could you
strike
state it
his.
very clearly for,
So to be clear, page 9, line 5, the word his, as it appears, strike that and insert the.
you've heard the motion, is there a second? Senator Anderson? Pierre, do you have that? That major change here? Okay. Any discussion on the amendment?
I think it's an excellent amendment by Senator Cole.
I got check 1 in my box of wins today.
Okay, Senator Brennan.
Abby's got
As I read it, I feel like the his reads better, but I'll let you have the.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? We'll take a quick vote on the amendment. All those in favor of, I don't believe that has to be a voice vote. All those in favor of Senator Kolb's amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The amendment is carried. Further discussion on the bill? Question on the bill. Pierre, roll call, please.
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Brennan,
Aye.
Senator Cooper,
Aye.
Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Chairman Pappas.
Excused.
4 ayes, one excused.
So House Bill 23 has passed the Transportation Committee. I guess the next one for our consideration, what's their time? We got plenty of time.
Who's gonna do that on the floor, Cole?
Oh, yeah, it's like
Cole was really
Senator
good.
Brennan would seem to be enthusiastic about the.
about
is
that.
the.
Super excited about the. I can do that.
Senator Brennan, you are in charge of the amendment. Okay, our next bill for our consideration is House Bill 25. Here's a couple gentlemen who'd like to visit on this. Gentlemen, if you'd be good enough to introduce yourselves and give us your opinion, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Colonel Tim Cameron, I'm the Administrator of the Wyoming Highway Patrol. Submitted this morning for your consideration is an amended statute removing the $1,000 threshold, which would require a crash report. The amended statute would require crash reports on fatal or personal injury accidents, or if the vehicle is so disabled that it can't be safely removed or driven from the scene. In essence, that's what this bill does. That $1,000 threshold has been in place for some time. $1,000 in today's market is, even the most minor damage is going to be $1,000 or more. So what this is also about is time on task for peace officers across Wyoming. just for informational purposes, we had over 5,000 single vehicle accidents in 2023 and almost 4,900 in 2024. I can't tell you that all those accidents would fall into this category, but that's just an example for a trooper that handles a slide off where there's minor damage to a vehicle. We're writing crashes on that now. Removing this threshold, that means that the trooper, once he assists with the motorist getting him back on the highway and moving, would not have to write a crash report. Again, this is, the word efficiency is used quite a bit, but this is an efficiency, especially on time on task. I'd be glad to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Jermaine, do you have anything?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, I'm
Question.
Mr. Anderson, go ahead.
We're talking about your agency here. What about local police and sheriff and that kind of stuff? Would they follow these same rules?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Senator Anderson, this would be, of course, the statute would cover every peace officer in every agency in Wyoming. And I think you will hear from Mr. Thompson regarding WASCOP membership on this bill as well.
Very good. First question go ahead, Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair. Cooper, is this, I guess, maybe you don't know this, but I'll ask it. When it comes to persons who are involved in an accident and you not having a crash report, is there any negative downside for them dealing with, say, their insurance company and getting a claim paid because, say, there isn't a crash report on said accident? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kolb, I can't tell you that I think there's a downside. The reality is every police agency in Wyoming that responds to a crash, there's recordation of that officer responding, the day, the time that he was there, the person that called it in. And most have computer systems or CAD, computer-aided dispatch. That event is in there, so it's recorded for posterity, so to speak. Without a crash report, and this came up during the interims, I think this was an interim topic, about us establishing who's at fault. We don't do that. We simply record who's involved in the accident and what the causative factors were. That information would then go to their insurance company and be settled civilly. In most of these cases, I used single vehicles as an example. There is no other injured party in that, solely the owner or the operator of that vehicle. If it's more than one vehicle, we would exchange information of all the parties involved, provide insurance company information, and that would be settled in a civil manner, much like any accident that we would incur that's less than 1,000. I don't know that peace officers are the best judges of the monetary amount of damage, especially now, where they don't necessarily fix things, they just replace it.
Senator Kolb, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair Cooper. But you would still issue a citation if you felt there was somebody at fault during an accident, I guess, investigation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kolb, that could be done, yes.
Okay. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, on line 18, page 2, you've got excluding bicycles. Now we have these e-bikes. Would they fit in that category of bicycles?
Mr. Chair, Senator Anderson, this is existing language in the bill now, but that is a great observation. I would argue that an e-bike is not just human power. So you could argue that it wouldn't apply to this section.
Okay. Further questions? Mr. Jermaine, do you have something to add?
Mr. Chairman, committee, good morning. Lieutenant Colonel Carl Germain, Wyoming Highway Patrol. I would just point out when we're investigating these crashes, we are deliberate in not using the word fault. We look for violations of Wyoming state statute. And if there is one, that's up to the discretion of the trooper or officer or deputy to issue that citation. There are certainly a number of times where you could have a multiple vehicle accident and both parties are receiving a citation for a number of reasons. So I just wanted to make that point. The other point that I would make in regards to this bill is anytime we can get a member of the public and an officer off the side of the road, clear an intersection faster, it makes Wyoming roadways and citizens safer. I'll stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Colonel. Further questions for Senator Cole?
Just to follow up, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it makes the troopers safer. Wouldn't you agree?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, yes, it makes everyone involved safer.
Thank you. Any further questions for the gentleman? Seeing none, is there anyone else in the room who'd like to testify? Mr. Thompson, are you wanting to put your 2 cents for us? Go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Chairman, Alan Thompson with WASCOP, the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police, and our membership does support this idea. The questions that were faced by the troopers that were just up here are some of the same questions that we've looked through with a small, or not small, but the local agencies, your sheriff's offices and police departments. So this does still require somebody to notify law enforcement if there's disabling damage or injury. And I think what we would find is most people, even in the most minor fender bender, will choose to call law enforcement. And in my experience, law enforcement does respond to the scene. This just separates the requirement of the state motor vehicle accident report from being completed and sent off to the state unless it meets those parameters. But as we've heard with testimony earlier, law enforcement will still respond. They will still have a record of that, would still be subject to subpoena by the insurance companies or providing those reports on the local level to the insurance company. And I just also wanted to mention that when law enforcement does arrive to investigate that crime, they're looking for violations of law. And oftentimes you could see a citation issued to somebody in an accident who was not at fault. You know, they have no insurance, they have no driver's license, or all those other things. Those citations are also issued. So officers still investigate all aspects of the crime, not just anything that led up to the cause of the crash. So I'd be happy to answer any specific questions anyone might have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, any questions for Mr. Thompson? Doesn't look like it. Anybody else in the room would like to testify on House Bill 25? Pierre, anybody online? Nobody online. We'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Second.
Moved by Brennan, second by Anderson. Discussion? Any amendments? No discussion, no amendments? Question? Pierre, you ready to call roll?
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Brennan,
Aye.
Senator Cooper,
Aye.
Senator Cole,
Aye.
Chairman Pappas.
Excused.
Do pass.
Senator Kolb, you like this one?
I like this one.
All right. Good enough.
I would have liked the very first one better, but I'm going to take this.
Okay. So we still have one more bill on our docket here. I think we got a little time. It looks like a fairly simple bill. I didn't say that, did I? Jesus. House Bill 27. Ms. Zimmerman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Cooper. Again, Misty Zimmerman, Wyoming Department of Transportation, Driver Services. This bill effectively removes the requirement for an expiration date on a permanent placard and allows for the department to print the word permanent. And then also allows for the temporary placard to have the expiration date as required by law. Again, this is another bill that was brought about through our modernization project. There was one amendment that was done on the House that actually changed the effective date to January 1, 2026. But other than that, if there are any questions, I'll stand for questions.
Questions for Ms. Zimmerman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Senator
So what
Anderson.
is the difference between a temporary and a permanent? Is there a different color, or does it say something different, or?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, the permanent placards are blue and the temporary placards are red. So they're easily identifiable.
Okay, that's pretty straight up.
Yeah, that's good.
Further questions? Senator Kolb?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Did it cost a lot of money to make them a different color?
Ms. Zimmerman?
Chairman Cooper, Senator Gold, they're currently at different colors as it exists today. So this is not a change to what we're currently doing. The
Okay,
answer
so,
is no.
Ms. Zimmerman, basically what we're doing with this is adding the word permanent to the permanent ones and adding a date to the temporary ones. Is that correct?
Chairman Cooper, the date exists today on both of them. So right now our permanent placards have a 10-year expiration date, which doesn't make them permanent. So we're just changing that to be permanent on permanent and keeping the expiration date on the temporary.
Changing one word.
Yep.
So, Mr. Chairman, so how do you score a permanent placard? How do you get one? I have a friend who isn't necessarily permanent disabled, but he applied 3 different times and finally you sent him a permanent one. And he's kind of like, wow, all right.
Chairman Cooper, Senator Anderson, that's the discretion of the physician that prescribes the letter to us. We don't determine it whether it's a permanent or a temporary placard.
Oh,
Oh,
huh.
all right. Further questions? Thank you, Ms. Zimmerman. Anybody else in the room would like to just
Like to speak
comment
temporarily
on this permanent?
or
change?
permanent?
Doesn't look like it. Anybody online, Pierre? Okay, public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Brennan and Cole. Discussion? Brennan, Senator Brennan, excuse me.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Senator Kolb might appreciate that with the word permanent here, we don't have to replace these every 10 years. That should save us a little bit of money.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Senator Cole. We're doing whatever we can to make some bucks here.
Pave another inch of road.
There you go. Any further discussion? Seeing none? Pierre, maybe you can do a roll call for us.
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Brennan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cooper,
Aye.
Senator Cole,
Aye.
Chairman Pappas.
Excused.
It's a do pass.
Well, committee, that clears our docket. Any further discussion?
Sounds like a chairman bill. Is this a chairman bill?
Well, it could be a chairman bill unless
Unless if you want me to do it, I can.
Senator Brennan's only got one word so far. We can give her 2 words if she'd like. That'd be just wonderful, Senator Brennan. Thank you. Can you remember both words?
I'll try.
All right, very good. So committee, that brings our meeting to a conclusion. Meeting is adjourned.
Do we know if we have any bills for Thursday?